getting near to the end. Welcome, everybody. Just want to thank the Sasson family again, sponsoring in the memory of their father, Albert. Bakasha, Dr. Marc, I think we're doing tonight Rav Henkin's view on
Yes, we
Langanger.
are indeed. But before we get to that, Rabbi Ross Singer listens to the classes, and he sent me a couple things. First of all, I thought that the Rogachover's view on ribis, on interest, was like a unique view. Apparently, it's not, and others hold of it as well. He said that Rav Yoel Ben Nun has a couple of short articles about this, and he discusses the Safnas Paneach, that's the Rogachover, and adds his own reason why the laws of Rivert don't apply to banks, et cetera, et cetera. And I looked at some sources, and I saw apparently there's an important tshuva by Rav Yitzchak Halevi Itinga, which he makes that point. So it's not a unique point. But the reason I mentioned Rabbi Ross Singer is because if you recall last class, I said that Rabbi Barda from Ashkelon, he's like head of the yeshiva and institutions in Ashkelon, he named his son Rava. And I said at least the son says it's the first time anyone's been named Rava in 1800 years. So I said, I wonder about Abaye. So Rabbi Singer says that his son is named Abaye. And he says he got this idea from Rabbi David Silber and Devorah Steinmetz, who also named their son Abaye. And then he says that he met another person named Abaye, who's from Tzfat, and he hears there's an Abaye Modi'in. So at least four Abayes out there. So look, maybe there's some other Ravas out there. I think it's great. I like bringing back these old names. How about Tarfon or Yishmael? Yishmael is an okay name, but today with the Arab-Israeli dispute, it's problematic. But it's an okay name, Yishmael. In fact, there was a great rabbi in Italy. We're going to Italy this summer, and we're not going to the city of Modena, though. So I don't know if I'll talk about him, but the last great Italian posek, Rav Yishmael HaKohen of Modena, he wrote the Chuvos Zera Emet. Rav Yosef quotes Zera Emet more than the Igros Moshe. So great halachic authority, clean shaven, as they all were in Italy. Yair Halevi, who wrote the article, not the article, sorry, the dissertation, it will be a book on emerging Haredi society, points something out to me. I didn't get it exactly correct. Rabbi Beckhofer was the one who pointed something out, and I elaborated. I think I was also under the assumption that the first time there was actual elections for the chief rabbinate where opposing side was when the 1972 elections. It's actually not true. The way they used to do it is that when a chief rabbi had to be elected for the first time, the other chief rabbi was elected, but it was pro forma. For example, when Rav Herzog was elected the second time, he ran unopposed. But actually, in the 1960s, 1964, I think it is, when Rav Unterman was elected chief rabbi, so that was a real competition between him and Rav Goren. Rav Unterman only won by 3 votes. However, Rav Nissim also ran for re-election against Rav Ovadia Hadaya. So that's there's an example of where, again, they were trying to unseat a sitting rabbi, this Rav Ovadia Hadaya. He wrote the Chuvas Yaskil Avdi, an important Syrian from the Aleppo community. Okay. Before I begin, a number of you are interested in this. I spoke about it last class or the class before, the techeiles parody. So let me show you what I'm talking about here because it became a big issue in Israel. Oh, about heter. I forgot to mention this. I went online and I found, lo and behold, you have American banks with heter. Here you have Devon Bank. Here you have Dime Community Bank. So these are Jewish-owned banks, and they have heter. What I wanted to show you is there's this website called techeiles.org, and they have lists of they're pro techeiles. So they have a page here which talks about this kuntras by Rabbi Eliezer Hol. I have no idea who he is. And he's opposed to techeiles. He thinks that techeiles owns a fish that lives in the Kinneret, and the true color of techeiles is nearly black. And he wrote a kuntras called Techeiles de Chilazo. And you can get it here, and you can see the responses to him. And then he has a response as well. And let's see, I'm going to enlarge this a little. And he just has a one-page response, and he says in this response here, which is called Hamat Aduyuk al Advarim, he says the basis of his view is from the Rishonim and the Zohar and others that there are two chilazons, two things called chilazon. One is the chilazon of techeiles, and then there's the other one. So that's his argument, and that what people are saying about techeiles, they're confusing the two different types of techeiles, etc. Now, in this website, they have at the bottom here, although the following article is written in a humorous manner, it makes a serious point regarding the mistaken conclusions one can draw if one reads the words of Chazal at a surface level only. So this is Tekhelet de Pila zone, a satirical response. Now, I just want to tell you what it says because it's very funny, and I want to also show you. Hold on a second. That oops, no. Okay, I'm going to show you. Let me close this out. I want to show you what appears, that what I'm going to read you appears in the. Oh, actually, I have it on my. I think I have it on my. Yes, I have it. Okay, so let me share with you here again. What I'm going to show you now appears in the Yalkut Yosef. That's why it was such a scandal. Everything I'm going to read you now appears in the Yalkut Yosef, and I'll show you in a second again what it is. So here's the parody. He begins as follows. He's responding to Techhelet, the Kuntras, Techhelet, Techilazon. And he says he got this Kuntras, and the person argues that he proves, he's sarcastic, there are two Chilazons. One was in the Yam HaTichon, the Mediterranean, which isn't kosher for tzitzis. That's the one that we all use. And then the other one is in the Kinneret. And therefore, he answers all these shilas. So he says, he goes on and says that, I'll just skip to the best part. He says that that we find that Shevet Zvulun, the tribe of Zvulun, that's where you have the Chilazon. And also in the Yam HaTichon and the Yam HaKinneret. So there must be, since there's two Chilazones, there must be two tribes of Zavulun. And that's why his name is Zavulun, because Zavulun's plural, like we don't have with other Shvatim. And then it goes on, now we answer the Stira. It says in Vayigash that Leah had 33 children. We see that she had 33 descendants, children. Well, not descendants, yeah. And if you count it, there's only 32. So the 33rd one must be Zavulun. There's two Zavulins. And he says, don't ask a question. What does it say? Bnei Yaakov had, how many children did Bnei Yaakov had? 12? Because that would mean that he had 13, because he had two Zavulians. Deyesh Lamar Detrei Yaakov Havu. Really, there were two Yaakovs. Again, you think I'm joking here. This all appears in the Yalkut Yosef. Now, so who put this in? Who doesn't know? Clearly, if Yitzhak Yosef didn't know this, so who's writing the Yalkut Yosef? Here, so let me go four. And he says, and by the way, we know there were two Yaakovs. Why? Because here's the proof of it. Let me show you the proof that there's two Yaakovs. What does the pasuk say in Bereshis, Parachav Zion, Lamed Zion? It says here, is it? Oh no, Lamed Vav. What did Esav say? V'yakveni zeh pamayim. Why? He's called Jacob because he supplanted me 2 times. So that shows you that there's two Yaakovs. And then he goes on, V'gam Yitzchak have trade. There were two Yitzchaks. How do we know there are two Yitzchaks? Because it says, Ela todos Yitzchak ben Avraham, Avraham holidas Yitzchak. It says it twice. These are the descendants of Yitzchak, son of Avraham. Avraham had Yitzchak. And we know that there's only one Avraham. How do we know there's only one Avraham, he says? Because look at the Yecheskel Lamed Gimel Chaf Daled. It says, Echad Haya Avraham. Okay. Then he goes on. Now this answers a stira. What's the stira that this answers? How old was Yitzchak at the Akedah? Uh, there's two opinions on it. So it might, was he a youngster or was he 36? No, there were two Yitzchaks. And then we have, he says we can answer the question, was Rivka 3 years old when she married or was she 14? D'yesh lomer d'trei Yitzchak havu. There were two Yitzchaks. V'chol chad v'chad hitchatenim Rivka dilei. Everyone married their own Rivka. And then he goes on this is all in the Yalkut Yosef. And then he goes on, it appears clear, he's making fun of the person who said there's two chilozons. That we see that Hashem promised to give Bnei Yisrael, Eretz Yisrael, Hainu L'chol Yitzchak v'Yitzchak. He promised that to each Yitzchak. The Trei Eretz Yisrael havu. There are really two Eretz Yisraels. And now we can answer many questions by this. Because the Gemara in one place says that Eretz Yisrael is higher than all the other lands. But the Eretz Yisrael we know is not higher than the other lands. So therefore there must be two Eretz Yisraels. And the Grub made a map of Eretz Yisrael. And it doesn't look like Eretz Yisrael. And also, this is great. The sages say that the air of Eretz Yisrael makes you smart. But we see that's not the case. The people that are not smart. So it must be referring to the other Eretz Yisrael. The al karchach, the trei Eretz Yisrael havu. Chad l'chol Yitzchak v'Yakov. And then he says, and what about the fact? We don't see another Eretz Yisrael. So where's this other show? It could be that there's two worlds, that Eretz Yisrael in this world and Eretz Yisrael in the other world. And our world, he says that our world is not like the world of Chazal, because our world is round. And Chazal, the Gemara says here, in the Gemara, it says that in Bav Basra, it's taught, Rabbi Lezer says, the world is like an achsadra, which is like a closed veranda. That's how they translate it here. And our world is not like that. So there must be two worlds. And then he goes on in the other world, in the Kinneret, which is the chayok of Zvulun Hasheni. That's where you find kosher chilazot. And then he says, all this is clear, and it's not something new, because we find this with Eov also, because there's a steer in Chazal. Two opinions. One opinion says Eov never existed, it's just an allegory. And the other opinion said he did exist. It must be that there are two Eovs. Echad haya, one existed. V'echad lo haya v'lo nivra. And we have explicit pasuk that shows us this. What's the pasuk? And this is how he ends. If you look in Tehillim, here's the pasuk in chapter 62, verse 12. Achas diber Elohim, God has spoken once. Shtayim zu shamati. Twice I have heard this. So we see here, therefore, that with everything of importance, if it's worth being one, it's worth there being a second one. So everything is, there's two. So this is clear Purim Torah. Anyone with any brain would see this, that this is a big joke, and yet here it is. It appears in the, and look at it. Look where my thing is there. He doesn't even quote the final part of it, the last paragraph. So in other words, someone actually not only lifted this, but didn't even include everything. So this is one of the great scandals in rabbinic literature in modern times, that a leitzonos, a parody, a Purim Torah like this, ends up in the most popular halachic work after Rav Muhammad's work, one that's found in every single shul. But pretty much every base medrash, as I say. Fortunately, it only appears in the most recent editions, because they keep making the Yalkut Yosef. So the one in your base medrash might not have it. And when they found out about this, now the new Yalkut Yosef, what they did is they put like this, the sticky thing that goes on top of it. So they put it, but it's so that's the parody about techeiles. And I have to tell you that yes, Rabbi Allen, it's exactly like Masachet Prohibition. But there everyone knew was a
This
parody.
foreshadows the two-state solution, doesn't
That's
it?
the two-state solution. Very good. But when I read it, I actually laughed. When I was smiling the whole time, but when I got to the two Eoves, really, it's machokas. Did Eov live or not live? Actually, there's two Eoves. One lived and one did not live. Okay, so there it is. By the way, he makes a big joke about it, but Rav Herzog, in his doctoral dissertation, actually says that there's chilazon and there's chilazon of techeiles. And that every time techeiles is mentioned, it doesn't mean the chilazon of techeiles. So this guy's making a whole joke about it, but it's really it's not Leitzonas. It's Rav Herzog, who was a big advocate of chilazon. He says that. Okay, we will see if we can finish today about the Langer dispute. But we have important things to deal with because we're going to look at the controversy over the position of Rabbi Henkin, the great Rav Yosef Eliyahu Henkin, the posek of New York and of America. Before Moshe arrives on the scene, he is the leading posek. He never had the international fame that Rav Moshe Feinstein did, but he was a great posek, and he lives right near Rav Moshe, and they were very good friends and often discussed halachic matters. They had a great dispute, of course, over whether civil marriage is binding halachically. Rav Henkin thought it was. Rav Henkin was head of Ezra's Torah, which raised tzedakah, raised money for Torah scholars. He was very involved in Agudas Harabanim. I mean, you look at his descendants now. He has many descendants who achieved great things. By the way, when the old joke was that when people got smicha from YU, on the back of it, I don't even know if it's a joke. I mean, well, they literally put it on there, but the idea was they said they got it with Rav Henkin's phone number on the back of it. Because I heard this from a Rabbi Grauer, the father of the rabbi in Toronto. So he was a musmach, I guess, in the early 60s, probably, or maybe the 50s even, I don't know. And he told me that they told them any shilas you ask Rabbi Henkin, because Rabbi Soloveitchik really didn't deal so much in practical halacha. Now, this issue, I mean, his role is of interest because at least it was reported that he came out in support of Goren, but we want to see the details of this because it's more complicated than it appears at first glance. And Eitam Henkin, by the way, this name, it's not Eitan, it's Eitam. Eitam has become a name now in Israel, but Eitam is the place name in Eretz Yisrael when they leave Mitzrayim. It's not a person's name, but it's a very nice name. He has an entire article dealing with this, and I spent Pesach with someone who was involved in translating a number of the articles in the book, Eitam Henkin's English book. It was translated to English from Hebrew. It's called Studies in Halacha and Rabbinic History, published by Magid 2021. By the way, Eitam Henkin, there was plans for him, great plans. The idea was that he was, so I was told, they were going to open a yeshiva named after Rav Goren, and Eitam Henkin was going to be the Rosh Yeshiva. At least that was the plan. What we lost by Eitam Henkin being taken from us, he was such a unique individual. It's unbelievable what we lost with Eitam Henkin. But I want to, before I talk about this, I want to show you a picture. The picture I'm going to show you comes from this book. This book is called Aschaltahi, a thick book. This is volume 2 by Rav Yitzchak Dadon. Yitzchak Dadon I don't know if he's in Kollel now, but he was in Kollel for many years at Merkaz Harav. In fact, if you recall back, I think it was 2008, when the terrorists were in Merkaz Harav, Yitzchak Dadon was on top of the roof learning, and he was the one who killed one of the terrorists. And he's published a number of Sfarim, especially the stuff I showed you from Rav Shapiro earlier. He published that book. This is a book listing of all the Gedolim who thought that the state of Israel was the beginning of the redemption or expressed Zionist sentiments. And you have in here a chapter on Rav Henkin. Not that Rav Henkin was a religious Zionist, but he was a big supporter of the state of Israel once it came into being. Before the state of Israel, he was an anti-Zionist because he thought it would be dangerous. for the Jews there. But he was a big rejecter of the Satmar philosophy, etc. Now, in this book, there's a picture. I want to show you the picture. Here's the picture. Oh, and it says Rabbeinu, that's in the middle, Rav Henkin, with Rav Shlomo Goren, and with Rav David Lifshitz. Now, Dadon identifies this individual, whom the cursor's over, as Rav Goren, and therefore he's assuming this is Rav David Lifshitz. In other words, Rabbi Dadon doesn't know who either of them are. He saw this picture, and he saw in the identification this picture. He obviously must have seen this picture where it identifies Rabbi Henkin and Rav David Lifshitz. And since he knows that this individual over here is Rav Goren, after all, he looks at it, it looks like Rav Goren, he therefore concluded that this must be Rav David Lifshitz, but really it's all wrong. It's all wrong because this is Rav David Lifshitz, not Rav Goren. I see from the side it looks a little like Rav Goren, but it's not. Now, this was pointed out to me by Eitam Henkin, Hashem Yikom Damo himself. He pointed this out to me. And I actually thought I saw what he wrote, and I thought that, hey, that's Rav Goren. But no, it's Rav David Lifshitz. And in order to be absolutely certain, I asked Chaim Waxman. Chaim Waxman, who's the son-in-law of Rav Lifshitz, and he says, yes, of course, that's Rav David Lifshitz. So who's on the left? His name was Rav Moshe Margolin. He was the secretary of Ezra's Torah. So that's just an interesting tidbit there. By the way, in volume 1 of this book, Aschalta, Rabbi Dadon makes great use of the volume I published, Kisvei Rabbi Yaakov Weinberg, volume 2, which has Rabbi Weinberg's great essay on Herzl. And I jokingly tell people that I like this book very much because it refers to me, that is the publisher, the editor, it refers to me as a Motzi La'or Shlita. So when he mentions my notes in that, he refers to the Motzi La'or Shlita. By the way, subsequently, I've met him. Okay, I want to now summarize for you what Rabbi Eitam Henkin uncovered, and then come up with mention some other things. If you look in his book on page, let me. Actually, I'll start with Rav Eitam Henkin before I turn to the other matters. He has a whole chapter. The title of this chapter is This is Politics, Not Halacha, Rav Shlomo Langer, The Langer Affair, and Rav Yosef Eloi Henkin. The first part is just things we've been dealing with, and beginning towards page 421 and on, that's where it deals with Rav Henkin. And he deals with, before he gets into it, he deals with the fact that Rav Henkin accorded great importance for the chief rabbinate. He thought that was important. Okay, so what's the issue? And this is, I'm just going to be summarizing for you for what Rabbi Henkin Jr., Eitam Henkin, says about his great-grandfather. Rabbi Emanuel Rackman published he had a column in the Jewish Week, the JTA, Jewish Telegraphic Agency. He said that Rabbi Henkin has been telling people that he agrees with Rav Goren's decision in the Langer case. And Rav Henkin said that Rabbi Rackman said that Rav Henkin, agreeing with Rav Goren, quote, should silence once and for all those who reacted negatively against the ruling. Now, as Henkin points out, this put Agudas Rabbanim in an embarrassing situation because Rabbi Henkin was one of the leaders of Agudas Rabbanim, and Agudas Rabbanim had come out shortly before this with a declaration. This was in February of 1973, and about a month before that, or a month and a half, Agudas Rabbanim came out with a declaration, signed with Rabbi Moshe Feinstein, and you know what? I can't remember. It was Rav Moshe and Rabbi Elberg. I don't know if anyone else signs it, but it was signed in the name of Agudas Rabbanim. No, sorry. Rav Moshe Feinstein signed a separate letter, and the Agudas Rabbanim was just signed Agudas Rabbanim. So here you have a leader of Agudas Rabbanim agreeing with Rav Goren. I mean, not only is he one of the leading figures in Agudas Rabbanim, I think in 1973, you can refer to him as the elder posek of America, the elder rabbi of America. I want to even he dies in 1973. I'm looking it up right now. I just want to get you. I don't have at least the Hebrew. I'm looking English. He dies in Av in the summer of 19. Okay, so here you have the elder, really statesman of Agudas Rabbanim, the great posek, and he's agreeing with Rav Goren. So that's obviously problematic. So Chaim Henkin describes how Agudas Rabbanim, what they came out with a statement that Rabbi Rachman's own statement about Rav Henkin is completely false. In fact, they don't call him rabbi. They call him, well, they write in Hebrew, the way Rav Moshe Feinstein refers to the non-Orthodox rabbis, Reish, Aleph, Bet, Yud, Yud, I think is how he does it. And they say that this is incorrect, that and that we met with Rav Henkin, and he denounced Rav Goren's heter in the strongest language possible. He says, I strongly object to anyone saying I agree with Rav Goren. They say that we recorded Rav Goren's, Rav Henkin's conversation, and they got later on, they figured, I guess, that they're saying it is not enough, so they got Rav Henkin to sign a letter. What does Rav Henkin say? Now, this is very important. Listen to this, signed by Rav Henkin. With regard to the general question in the matter of Rav Goren's heter, in my opinion, the matter is extremely difficult and requires the agreement of the great rabbinical leaders of our time, together with the agreement of the great rabbinical leaders in the entire world. As long as no such court of law is convened, one should not rely on a heter such as this. So it does seem that Rav Henkin, and he signed Rav Henkin, it does seem that Rav Henkin is saying that since this is such a difficult case, you need to have the agreement. Rav Goren cannot do what he does without the agreement of all the great rabbinical leaders. And since there hasn't been such an agreement, no one should rely on such a heter. However, Chaim Henkin points out a few things going forward. First of all, Rav Henkin Senior was blind at this time. He had been blind for a couple of years. He was not able to review Rav Goren's book on his own. So he doesn't deal with issues such as Borakovsky's status or anything like that. Chaim Henkin says, how do you understand what Rav Henkin says? That the language, he says, with regard to the general question in the matter of Goren's heter. What does it mean, the general question? Chaim Henkin says, could understand it two ways. One, does a later rabbinic court have the authority to contradict a ruling of earlier rabbinic courts? Namely, does Rav Goren, is based in, does he have the right to contradict what the other Batei Din said? Or you could say that when he says the general question of Rav Goren's heter, it could be, can a rabbinical court release someone from Amzerus by saying that the first husband wasn't converted properly? Okay, but however you look at it, Chaim Henkin points out that on the face of it, Rav Henkin seems to reject Rav Goren's ruling, even if only after the fact. Now, Agudas Rabbanim only released a section of this letter. The only that where Rav Goren says that, where Rav Henkin says that since there's no court of law, we can't rely on Rav Goren's ruling. What about what he says with regard to the general question? Why didn't they release that? Chaim Henkin says because that would have raised the question. Maybe Rav Henkin was willing to agree that in this case, the Langanger case, Rav Goren's heter stands. But it's the general question in the matter of his heter. Namely, can you apply these approaches going forward? And the other questions, maybe people would say, well, yes, Rav Henkin says ex post facto, we can accept Rav Goren's ruling, but in a general issue, going forward, we can't. And perhaps that's the reason why they didn't quote the whole letter 8 times Henkin mentions, or maybe because in this letter, Rav Henkin relates respectfully to Rav Goren. And this is really in contrast to how Agudas Rabbanim related to Rav Goren. Okay. Now, once this became known, Rav Henkin's letter, it became known in Israel, and two sides both the supporters of Rav Goren and the opponents of Rav Goren use different parts of this letter, either arguing that the Rav Henkin is only speaking about the general issue, not about the actual case of Borakovsky, or no, that he's referring to the entire psak. At Sofer, the religious Zionists adopt one approach, and the Aguda adopts another approach. Look, the fact that you have a great post like Rav Henkin, the only one really in that world publicly coming out in favor of Goren, that would be what we call a big matzia. In fact, Ratzia Yehuda Cook, he cites Rav Henkin as agreeing. He didn't know. He just what he read in the newspaper that he agreed with Rav Goren. Okay, so that's what was known until Eitam Henkin wrote his piece. He discovered something amazing, however. And he asks himself in the last section of this article, what really did Rav Henkin hold? Which of the two opposing versions, namely that Rav Henkin said that we can't accept Rav Goren's ideas as a general new approach to halacha, but with regard to this particular case, we hold of what Rav Goren said, or no, he rejects the heter entirely. Well, there's two pieces of evidence. One of them I knew. The other one, no one could have known because it comes from Rav Henkin himself. If you look in the volume of Chuvot of Rav Henkin's father, Rav Yehuda Herzl Henkin, he has testimony from there was a student who would learn with Rav Henkin at the last years of his life and took care of him, a shamus, whatever you want to call it. And he recorded here a number of things that Rav Henkin told him. And it was published together with material that actually it's called Imre Hagon Rosalia Henkin. And it has, 40 or 50 things that he was told. And Rabbi Yehuda Herzl Henkin says that I heard a number of these things also from my grandfather. But in one of them, number 24, which, by the way, Rav Yehuda Herzl Henkin says that he heard also similar things from his grandfather. This is what Rav Henkin is quoted as saying. Concerning the dispute that broke out between the chief rabbi of Eretz Yisrael, that's Rav Goren, and the other Gedolim, Rav Henkin said that even though he never gave official ishur, a certification or agreement to the psak of Rav Goren because he was blind and he couldn't read it, what he wrote. Nevertheless, he decided besakina harifa, that is very strongly, that asor l'shum adam lachokolav kevan, it's forbidden for anyone to dispute with Rav Goren, which is a strange thing to say because even the supporters of Rav Goren never said that, but that's what he was saying, because he was appointed as chief rabbi and he is an adam gadol migdolei hador. He's one of the gedolim. And all the criticisms that they critiqued Rav Goren, he pushed to the side. And when I said to him, this is the yeshiva students, that they're saying that Rav Goren, they're regarding him as someone who took a bribe. That's why he gave this heter. He wanted to be elected chief rabbi. Rabbi Henkin answered very strongly and said, "Zeh politic, lo halacha. This is politics, not halacha." And the student says that Rav Henkin refused to back off this opinion until the day of his death, despite the fact that people, they threatened him and they tried to convince him, etc., and they came to him, etc. Okay, so here you have an amazing statement. You have from the person who was with Rav Henkin at the end of his life, saying that Rav Henkin said that Rav Goren's a great posek, and you can't reject his opinion in this matter. Now, Eitam Henkin is going to question this idea. That he actually would have said you can't dispute with Rav Goren. Even the supporters of Rav Goren never said you can't dispute him. They said you can dispute him, but it's a machokes. So Eitam Henkin thinks that the student is probably reflecting his own opinions in this matter and is going a little overboard. I don't know if that's the case. I think maybe what he's saying is that Rav Goren's the only one to investigate the details Borakovsky and his background, and therefore, unless someone else is going to investigate this, they can't dispute with him. But as you know, as long as no one else has looked into these matters, then his psak stands. Okay, but then he says, uh, Rav Henkin, sorry, Eitam Henkin provides a document from his own grandfather. Rabbi Henkin had a few children. One of them died young. The other is the famous constitutional, was it scholar, Louis Henkin. And then he has one, Avraham Hillel. I met Louis Henkin once, but Avraham Hillel, not only that, in my son's group, the Y Studs. If you don't know the Y Studs, they're the singing group. Why not only YU students? You can look online, look at their songs. One of the stars of the Y Studs, together with my son, his last name is Henkin. He's a grandson of Professor Louis Henkin. But there's another son, Avram Hillel Henkin. That's the father of Yehuda Herzl Henkin. Lo and behold, Avram Hillel Henkin left a handwritten note containing evidence of what he heard directly from Rabbi Henkin about the episode. And he wrote it down the same day he heard it from Rav Henkin. This was on March 4th, 1973. And this is absolute evidence. This is the son of Rav Henkin writing down what his father told me. So this is absolute evidence that Rav Henkin did indeed express support and appreciation for Rav Goren, and never withdrew his support. Now, what to make then of the statement which we read before? We'll get to that in a second. But here is what Avram Hillel Henkin wrote. Now, he wrote it in a combination of Yiddish, English, and Hebrew. Unfortunately, the people who translated this, they translated the Hebrew article. And the Hebrew article, I mean, I don't know why, because the last page of the article, when I checked, the actual article itself has this, not just in here. It has a photograph of the handwritten note of Avram Hillel Henkin. And so you can actually translate it, fine, translate it from the Yiddish and from the Hebrew, but he wrote in English also. He began, for example, saying, "Father told me today." So if you look in the article, it says, "Father said to me today." Because what happened is the people who translated this from Hebrew into English, they were just translating how Eitam Henkin translated it from English to Hebrew, and then they translated it back. But I'll read you the actual, what it says, the English, and this is what Avram Hillel Henkin recorded. Quote, "Father told me today, 1, he did not sign any letter." He did not sign any letter. Wait a second. Agudas Rabbanim published a letter signed by Rav Henkin about his opinion that I read it to you with regard to the general question of Goren's heter, etc. And here we have Rav Henkin saying, "I never signed a letter." 2, he didn't agree to a tape. That is, he did not agree to be recorded. The statement from Agudas Rabbanim says that they have a recording of him. Well, that means if they have a recording, it was done without Rav Henkin knowing about it. And then this is what he says, and he quotes here the words from his father in Yiddish, "Ich halt von Harav Goren." I'll read in English, though. "I hold for Rav Goren. He is a great rabbi. Is a groiser Rav. He is a great rabbi and fitting for position of the chief rabbi. And as one who holds the position of Rosh Rabbanim, head of the rabbis, as regarded to permissive ruling, that is the ruling." What this means, that's the ruling, is, the way I understand it, is that it stands. In general, one rabbinical court cannot cancel the ruling of another rabbinical court, but Rav Goren can. What does that mean, Rav Goren can? Apparently, because he got new information, investigated, or Eitam Henkin says maybe it means because he's chief rabbi. But then Rav Henkin says, but as to how right he was, namely how right Rav Goren was in this case, we won't know that for a long time, maybe even for years. Eitam Henkin thinks that means, was he right in his conduct? I'm thinking maybe it could mean, was he right Lamaisa in the psak? In other words, we can accept the psak, but was it right? This is something maybe in later years we'll say we shouldn't have interpreted that way. But Rav Henkin is saying that uh, his psak stands. Then it goes on. Now this is Avram Hillel Henkin writing again. Among those who spoke with him for hours in an attempt to move him from his position in favor of Rabbi Goren were Rabbi Rif, that's from Natali Yehuda Rif, important figure in Agudas Rabbanim. He was the rabbi of Camden, New Jersey. Camden, New Jersey used to have a Jewish community. Naftali Yehuda Rif. He's an anico of the Netziv. So he says, among those who spoke with my father for hours, trying to convince him not to support Rav Goren, were Rabbi Rif, Rabbi Feinstein, and Rabbi Altusky. That's Rabbi Yehuda Altusky. So here you have, speaking to his father and recording it that day, what he said. He begins, Father told me today that they sat with him, these three rabbis, for hours, it should say. I don't know how many hours, 2 hours, 3 hours, to try to get him to back off his support of Rav Goren. So obviously he did support Rav Goren. Otherwise they'd have nothing to speak to him about. And then the last paragraph, Mr. Berger, and he identifies who Mr. Berger is. No, he just says he's his personal attendant at the time. He doesn't say his first name. Mr. Berger insists that someone by the name of Rabbi L, an employee of Agudas Rabbanim, tried to force him to sign a partially empty paper with the intention of filling in the content afterwards, but Father refused. Now, in the English, he writes Rabbi L. And in the footnote, he says, I have omitted the rabbi's full name as he is currently alive in Israel. But if you turn 2 pages later, where you have the photograph of the letter, the document from Avram Hillel Henkin, you can read who it is. It doesn't say Rabbi L. It says Mr. Berger insists a Rabbi Levine. So whoever Rabbi Levine is. So I don't understand how. Why leave it empty here when you have the full thing later? And then it says, but Father refused with Mr. Berger's help. Why? Understanding he was being deceived. Dora is Rav Henkin's daughter, the wife of Rav Shimon Weber, says that Rabbi Moshe Eliezer Margolin got a signature out of him by means of a trick. So here we have an unbelievable thing here. We have a statement here that Rabbi Margolin and Rabbi Levine were trying to get Rav Henkin to sign on to something he didn't really want to sign on to. And Eitam Henkin asks, so how can what Rav Henkin's son says be reconciled with the signature? They published Rav Henkin's letter with his signature. Well, the end provides the answer. The signature was extracted by Rav Henkin from Rav Henkin by some means, without his necessarily knowing that he was signing a letter about the matter of Goren, or that this letter should be publicized. If any of you think this is strange, do you know how many times Rabbanim have signed things without realizing what they've been signing? Or they sign something and then more stuff is added onto it. Eitam Henkin says the matter is complex, however, because however he came to sign the letter, those involved in this matter were respected rabbis who can't be suspected of forging his name on statements totally opposed to his true opinion. The answer is, he says, that the letter Rav Henkin signed, even though he didn't agree to sign it, this only reflects a portion of his views, not his complete views. And at the end of the day, Rav Henkin had great admiration for Rav Goren, and based upon what we have, the knowledge that we have to agree with what the students said, that he supported Rav Goren's heter. That is, Rav Heter didn't support it on his own personal authority, but the heter is valid. You want to have another case, you want to reject it, but in this case, he's the Av Beis Din, and we're not going to question what the Av Beis Din and the Beis Din has to say. And that's why Rav Moshe and Rabbi Rif and Rabbi Altusky spent so long with Rav Henkin, because they wanted to remove him from this support. And then Eitam Henkin sums it up that Rav Henkin did not express an opinion on the halachic decision of Rav Goren in this matter because he never read it, so he couldn't agree with it. What he did say, though, was express that Rav Goren is a reliable Rav, and his psak is a valid psak. You don't want to accept it, fine, but it's a valid psak. He rejected the accusations against Rav Goren that he was gave his ruling to be elected chief rabbi or anything else, and Rav Goren refused to retreat from this position, and he refused to invalidate the heter. He doesn't think that the logic of Rav Goren is something that you can apply as a general rule in other cases. For that, you need all the gedolim to come. But in this case, individually, based in Sat, a ruling was given, and that's the psak. And that is Rav Henkin. Now, because unfortunately Eitam Henkin is no longer with us, and because unfortunately Rabbi Yehuda Herzl Henkin is no longer with us, we have a big problem that can't be answered, because Eitam Henkin writes as follows. On page 421, he says the student, the Kollel student, he says, the Kollel student who wrote up all the things that Rav Henkin told him did not sign his name to him, and his identity is unknown to this day. That's what Eitam Henkin says. So he says, it raises ambiguities. Now, I don't understand something. If you read his father in his Chuvos, B'nai Vonim, volume 2, page 208, he says that these things that I'm quoting, all these past things that come from Rav Henkin, were written at my request a few weeks after the death of Rabbi Henkin, al yedei avrech, by a Torah student, shalamadi to b'shnato achrona, who learned with him in the last year of his life when I already was in Eretz Yisrael. He came to comfort us during the Shiva, and he told us some of these things, and therefore I asked him to write it up. So what is Eitam Henkin talking about, saying that these are an anonymous student sent this in? This is the person who sat with Rav Henkin, who learned with him, who was in the house, who your father, Eitam Henkin, knew him and asked him to write it up. So something, and it's not a mistake in the translation. I looked in the original. Something, it's incomprehensible here. This, and Eitam Henkin is such a careful scholar. I don't know what's that about, and I unfortunately, was never able to ask him. And it's a mystery. But I think we have to follow what Rabbi Yehuda Herzl Henkin wrote. Okay, so that is Rav Henkin's view, and I think we can agree that Rav Henkin, I'm not going to say he supported the decision per se. He never examined the decision. How could he know? But he supported the psak in the sense that Rav Goren is an Av Beistin, a Goen in learning, and if he gave the psak, it is a valid psak. If you don't want to accept the psak, you don't have to accept the psak. But as a psak for the children, the Langanger children, and as a psak for the state of Israel, it is a valid psak, and anything else he thought is politics. The final individual of note, and this will be the last one that we deal with, and then we'll sum up a little bit about how everything we've seen. Can we have some conclusions about this? The final individual to publicly support Rav Goren, publicly, I'm talking in Nisan of 1973, when everyone else is afraid, is this individual. An individual we've seen, where is he? We've spoken about him many times. Rav Chaim Zimmerman. What a person Rav Chaim Zimmerman was. He took no prisoners. He was Yeshivas Rabbi Tzolchanan Musmach Eloi, becomes Rosh Yeshiva in Skokie. Character, I played you before, Beryl Wine's recollection of how he makes, he does like two things at once. He would drive around in a convertible. I mean, what a character, but an Eloi of Elois. Rav Chaim Zimmerman had moved to Eretz Yisrael in the 60s, and he became very connected to religious Zionist circles. I'm going to read you something he wrote. But why is he in Israel? Well, we've mentioned this as well in the past. He was fired from Skokie. That's why Rav Aaron Soloveitchik comes in. He takes over. You had first Rabbi Kreisworth, who left and then went to Antwerp, and then you had Rabbi Chaim Zimmerman um, at a Purim Suda with all the students there and community people there. Rabbi Chaim Zimmerman says something like, uh, and even my good friend, the Apikoros Eliezer Berkovitz, would agree with me. And Berkovitz is furious, and he has a soda bottle, and he throws it on the ground, and it breaks. And it was a scandal. The next day, the board of the yeshiva, Hebrew Theological College, meets and fires Rabbi Chaim Zimmerman. He moves to Eretz Yisrael. As far as I know, his son or his children are very conventional now in the Haredi world. But I want to read you something. This, and I thank Yair Halevi for alerting me to this. This appeared in Hatzofeh in Nisan 20 Nisan of 5733. And this was so significant that Rav Shach thought it was worthwhile to attack it. We won't get to Rav Shach's attack today. We'll get to next class. But the title of the article is Be'ikvasa de Mashiach, like in the footsteps of the Messiah. This is how Rabbi Zimmerman begins his article. Omdim anu bitkufa shel atchalta degula. He says, we are now in the era of the beginning of the redemption. That is a religious Zionist sort of statement. And before he even gets into Rav Goren, he speaks about this era we're in. He says, anyone who's removed themselves from these preconceptions and has looks at the halacha in the Torah Shechsav and Torah Shabbal Peh, you will see that we're in the Aschalta Degula. But he says you need to remove yourself from preconceived notions. And he says it's clear in the Rambam, and he says if you look at the Torah Shebechsav and Baal Peh, it'll be obvious to you that our era is everything that we were told it would be. And then he gets into Rav Goren. And I just want to read to you what Rav Goren he says about Rav Goren. He says Rav Goren, when he was a young man already, 15 years old, he was already an Eloi. Everyone knew he was an unbelievable Gaon, Bucky in all aspects of Torah, and one who was made chidushim, and that was in an era, he says, of real Gedolim, Rav Yisrael Meltzer, Rav Kook, etc., etc. And he goes on to say, then he says, where's his comment? Yeah, he. Hold on a second. I'm looking for the part where he mentions the I can't see it here. I think it maybe is blocked off the page I printed out. But he mentions. Hold on a second. I'll look. He mentions in particular this the case of the Langanger case. I mean, his whole point of talking about Rav Goren here is. Hold on a second. I'll get the words here. I'm looking on. Here he is. Okay. He says that unfortunately in our day, we have people who don't appreciate brilliance like Rav Goren, and how he knows how to bring Torah to the society, to the state of Israel, etc. Then he says in the Psak that the Psak of the Langer case, this is an example of Rav Goren of dealing with the reality of we have it of bringing halacha to the world. He's a gibor, he says, one of the of Torah, and he says that Kama gedoli masav havi rucha shel Torah laosam she'enam shomrei Torah, that he can bring Torah to them, to the people who are not religious, etc., etc. And then he says, I have not examined the psak of Rav Goren carefully, namely the Langer case, because I'm not involved in it. I'm not a dayan on this based in. However, he says, since the author is the Gaon Rav Shlomo Goren, he's a Gaon Niskav, Yachid Bimino, unique individual, he's saying, what do I need to look at it for? Rav Goren gave the psak. Then he says, I see now, however, that there's a pulmus, there's a dispute between those who oppose Rav Goren and against this psak. He says, but already we know that my friend, the Goren, Rav Eliezer Shapiro, he's the only Dayan really who was Ashkenazi Dayan who was public in his support. He already responded to them. And he says, I have not seen anything in the opposition to Rav Goren to uproot his conclusions in his Sefer. And he says that all the people opposing Rav Goren, they're writing Betsura Shahafkana Ishit, Sharuach Shal Kin'a, Vesina Nodef Mimena. He says it's clear that they're writing, they're opposed to Rav Goren. So rather than looking at the halachic issues and taking it seriously, instead they're using it as an opportunity to destroy Rav Goren. We'll finish actually tonight on this case. Just going to be 5 more minutes. For those who are interested, you can look in Rav Shach. Well, first of all, this is of note. People don't realize this. Rav Chaim Zimmerman, who everyone acknowledges as a Gaon of immense standing, he comes out openly in favor of Rav Goren. Now, it'll be of interest to many of you that in Rav Shach's letters, volume 3, page 98 and on, this is number 226, he doesn't mention him by name, but he says that they showed me an article, Ikfas of the Mashiach and article, and I saw things in it, things that are against what's Makubal Mishnos Dor Vador. And he says that Reach Shal Deos Chofshios Nodef Mechol Mamro, that secularism comes out of this article, and I have to respond to it. By the way, in Rav Shach's attack against Rav Soloveitchik, who he mentions by name, but is also very strong. He says the same thing, that basically he says that it's not Chofshio, but he says it's because of secular studies, and he says that what Rav Soloveitchik says is completely opposed to our tradition, our Jewish tradition. He's very upset that Rav Zimmerman sees any religious significance in the state of Israel, which he says is against our tradition, and these are secularists. And then he says, Rav Zimmerman in his article said he thinks it's significant that the state of Israel published this psak, and he thinks this is a wonderful thing that the state of Israel would publish a psak. He sees it as an example of Israel being more open to religion. I don't know if he's right about that, but that's what he says. And Rav Shach says, what kind of joke is this? Why did they print this psak but not any others? They printed this psak, psak neged Torah. The state of Israel is against Torah, and this psak is against Torah, and that's why they printed it. So real strong kanos here. Okay, I don't need to read any more about it. What I want to say, though, now we've completed our study of the Langanger case. We've gone, I think this is 12 or 13. We've seen the politics, we've seen the historical significance, we've seen halachic argumentation, all sorts of interesting things. I have to say, in my opinion, you might disagree, but in my opinion, the whole dispute really came down to and comes down to how you view Rav Goren. If you view him as not just a Talmud Chacham, but a pious rabbi with Yiras Shamayim, who would feel the gravity of the moment when he decides serious halacha questions, then you will completely reject the way he was demonized. And your response will be like Rav Chaim Zimmerman, like the other Dayanim, like Rabbi Henkin. And the only way that you can relate to Rav Goren the way his opponents did is if you did not see him as a serious posek, but as an opportunist who was prepared to twist halacha for his own purposes. That's what Rav Shach says. He says that this psak is about uprooting a law in the Torah. In other words, the dispute wasn't about Rav Goren's halachic arguments. Had another Dayan made the same argument, had Rav Jolti or Rav Yosef made the exact same argument Rav Goren made, there never would have been a controversy. Even if people opposed an argument, why is that a big deal? Oppose an argument. Lots of cases in the Beis Din Gadol, you have two Dayanim say one thing, another Dayan says something else. So the Dayan in the minority, he opposes the argument of the majority. But at the end of the day, the majority rules, so it's a valid psak. He accepts the psak. His attitude is, if I would have decided it would have been differently, and I think it should have been differently, but this is the psak, and of course, it's a valid psak. All you have to do is look through the various decisions of the Batei Din. You find this all the time. what made and that's what Rav Henkin was saying. It's a valid psak. You might not agree with it, but it's a valid psak. What the opponents were saying is it's not a valid psak. That this is not like two dayanim and a third dayan and you go by the majority. That the whole process and the whole approach and the rabbi doing it, they're all invalid. His opponents never saw him as an authentic posek. So it's not surprising they jumped on his view in the Langer case. But it's not about the Langer case per se. They couldn't let the Langer case go because he himself they thought was unreliable and not an authentic posek, and therefore by definition his ruling is inauthentic. But if Rav Yosef had issued the same psak with the same reasons, maybe people would have objected to certain readings in the sources of Rav Yosef, but they wouldn't have delegitimized the psak, and they wouldn't have delegitimized Rav Yosef. They would have accepted it as his psak, just like Rav Moshe Feinstein. Rav Moshe Feinstein gave numerous psakim. I mean, some of the ways Rav Moshe Feinstein uprooted marriages, he was attacked for this. Artificial insemination. I mean, you can go down the list. But it was understood that he's a reliable, authentic posek. We disagree with that, but and we're going to dispute what he says. But he's still a reliable posek, and his ruling stands for his followers. So that's how I see it. Now, we have next week and maybe another week after Victoria Day. I want to take you in. It'll only take one class, maybe two, but we'll see. There's another case that happened right before the Langer case, which is relevant to our story, and some of the same figures, the same dramatic personalities are involved, or dramatis personae are involved, and that's what's called the Seidman case. And that'll really take us, and then we'll end, and then we'll have a summer break. The Seidman case is another dispute that Rav Goren was involved in about conversions. Rav Soloveitchik actually expresses an opinion on this, and it's very relevant to the Langer case because whereas in the Langer case, Rav Goren uprooted a conversion. He says it wasn't valid. Actually, I shouldn't say that. His major argument was that there never was a conversion, but even if there was a conversion, it's invalid. We will see in the Seidman case, Rav Goren's approach of converting people who even aren't religious. And the Seidman case was about a woman, a convert, who was converted and remained with a Kohen, her Kohen boyfriend. How can a woman who converts be with a Kohen? And Rav Goren permitted it. And that became a huge dispute. By the way, the dispute was not about converting a woman who was not going to be religious. The Batei Din in Israel were doing that all the time. That wasn't a thing from Rav Goren. And we'll talk about how you can convert people who aren't going to be religious. Because today, this is regarded as like heresy, that anyone could say that. The feud, the Seidman case, was about how can you convert someone who's then going to be with a Kohen? By definition, the conversion can't be valid because her whole purpose of converting is to be with a Kohen. That was what the dispute focused on, and we will do that next class. Let me quickly look at some of the comments here. Yes, Chaim, Rav Henkin ruled that conservative and foreign marriages require to get, not just conservative and foreign marriages, civil marriages require to get. Conservative and reform, there's all sorts of reasons you can argue it should have a get. But he went so far as even saying civil marriages, because Rav Moshe had held differently. But Rav Moshe also held by reform marriages and even conservative marriages. There were many poskim, however, who held that civil marriages don't require a get, but a conservative marriage, because a conservative and reform even, you show that you want to be married Jewishly. But Rav Moshe was very lenient on that, or strict, however you look at it. Yes, so that was a great dispute. Now, David Eisen says Eitam is not only a place, but also means perfection. Okay. Should be Eitam. Yes, I know that. We all know that verse well, but I didn't remember that verse. So I think probably the meaning is Eitam is not from the place. It's probably from perfection. Yes, like the word Eitan as strength. David says, did Rav Goren ever meet with Rav Henkin? Rav Goren came to Rav Henkin. Rav Goren was in America many times, and he went to the Agudas Rabbanim meetings. So I would assume that they met and they were together, but we don't have any evidence of it. There's no pictures of them together. We have the Agudas Rabbanim like articles which mentions him there, but they, as far as I recall, there's no mention of Rav Henkin happened to be at that meeting. So I don't know. And then you say, do Rav Henkin's support for Rav Goren stem from appreciation of, I think you're saying Rav Goren stem from appreciation of Goren's rabbinic stature or his position in general to post the chief rabbinate? Well, it's a good question. Rav Henkin thought the chief rabbinate was very important. And so that's obviously going to be an important point. However, he also says that I mean he treats him as if he's a gadol in learning. I can't imagine Rav Henkin would have had this approach if it was like the chief rabbis in more recent times, where it's more just a political position. Everyone knew Rav Goren was a Goen Shebegonim. Rav Goren's father comes to America before World War II to raise money from Agudas Rabbanim. He would have Rav Goren's father would have met Rav Henkin because Rav Goren was considered the great Eloi, and they wanted to raise money in America so that he could sit and learn and not be worry about Parnassa or anything. So everyone knew Rav Goren was a Gon Shebegonim. Rabbi Yellen says, "Your Chaim Zimmerman come back to the U.S. after he moved to Eretz Yisrael?" No, he did not come back to the U.S. I'll give you his.
I was actually thinking of something else. I Googled him afterwards, and
Yeah.
it says he immigrated to Israel in 71. So I don't think
Oh, so that's right before that.
yeah.
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 And yeah, 64. It says until his he stopped
Yeah,
being
64 is when he left Skokie, and then he continued giving shurim privately in New York and Jerusalem, emigrated to Israel in 71.
Yeah, so when he died,
In 95.
yes, I remember when he died because who was it? It wasn't Rabbi Rakefet. It was someone else, but it was also Rabbi Rakefet because I remember he's on tape. He um, he came into class and he said that some great man died today, and none of you probably ever heard of him. And it's probably true. In 1995, the guys in Gross, who would have heard of Rav Chaim Zimmerman? And he is someone who was like a powerhouse in his day. Uh, yes, and David, I will discuss the Harold Simon case. And David, you say Rav Chaim Zimmerman became Rosh Yeshiva BMT. I had no idea of that. I had no idea that I'm a BMT graduate, and I never knew that Rav Chaim Zimmerman was Rosh Yeshiva of BMT. If you can find out how long that was, I never heard. Are you sure, David? Because Rabbi Rakefet was there in 1972, and he's never mentioned that, as far as I know, and I've never heard this before. So this is news to me. Do we need to confirm this with Rabbi Rakefet, or are you certain about this, David? It's one thing to come and give a shiur or two, but to be Rosh Yeshiva, I've never heard this before. And Rabbi Rakefet has never mentioned that. He's spoken a lot about BMT. He was there at the beginning. So I don't know. No reply. Okay, that's it then. We will next class we'll pick up with the Seidman case of Rav Goren.
Okay, thank you,
Very
Lila
good.
Tov.
Thank you very much.
Okay, Reb, thank you for the whole series. And okay, look forward to next week, Victoria Day, as you say, and then you're off the following week. Okay. And all right, tomorrow, Rabbi Shulman is continuing his class on Sefer Yeshua, and then our regular shiurim during the week. Okay, we look forward to learning. Yes, there is class next week. Yeah. Next week, this time, same channel. Okay, everybody, Lila Tov, let's hope to continue more good news. It's nice that at least one hostage got out, and let's hope we get more, and let's hope for good things. Okay, be well, everybody. Lila Tov.